Owen unscrewed the lid of the thermos, and the aroma of chicken soup spread through the hospital ward, mingling with the smell of disinfectant. "Miss Vivian." The landlord came again today. He stirred the chicken soup as he spoke. He said I'm 3 months behind on rent, and if I don't pay, he'll throw my things out. I explained to him that I get paid at the end of the month, and he called me a pauper. The woman on the hospital bed lay motionless. Her black hair was scattered across the pillow like spread-out silk. The cardiac monitor emitted a rhythmic beep, beep sound. 3 years and 3 months. Owen had heard this sound so often his ears were calloused. Actually, he wasn't wrong. Owen blew the chicken soup to cool it, scooped up a small spoonful, and brought it to her lips. "I really am a pauper." He fed her very gently, as if feeding a sleeping child. "Miss Vivian, do you know why I'm poor? When my dad got sick, I took out a loan shark loan, 800,000. Before he passed away, he told me not to live in debt. But as soon as he was gone, all the debt fell on me." He smiled, a bitter smile. "Sometimes I think if I hadn't borrowed that money back then, would my dad have passed away more at peace? But then I think again, without that money, he wouldn't have even survived those last few months. 1 round of chemotherapy costs 20,000, and a bottle of targeted drugs costs 8,000. A little bit of chicken soup trickled from the corner of her mouth, and he gently wiped it away with a tissue. "You see, this is just the kind of person I am. I overthink everything I do, and in the end, I please no one." That afternoon 3 years ago, Owen sat in the Sue family's living room, facing a middle-aged man in a black suit. "Mr. Owen, the agreement is simple." The man pushed a document across. "You get 40,000 a month to act as Miss Vivian's husband, for a term of 5 years. Is she really never going to wake up? Vegetative state. The chances of waking up are extremely low." The man spoke calmly. "The Sue family needs a legal husband to maintain her marital status and prevent collateral relatives from taking the opportunity to carve up the inheritance. You just need to come to the hospital for 2 hours a day to keep her company. 40,000. Owen calculated in his mind. 800,000 in debt, paying back 20,000 a month, 4 years to clear it. The remaining 20,000 is enough for food and rent. I'll sign." He picked up the pen and signed his name. His hand was shaking badly, and the signature came out crooked. At that time, he didn't know that this agreement would change his entire life. "Miss Vivian, let me tell you something, but don't laugh at me." After feeding her chicken soup, Owen started wiping her face. Over the past 3 years, he had become more familiar with her habits than the nursing aides. "I went for a job interview yesterday, for a clerk position at a small company, 6,000 a month." He paused, his face turning a bit red. "The interviewer asked me why I wanted the job, and in my nervousness, I said, 'Hello, pervert,' instead of 'hello.' The ward was so quiet that the only sound was the beeping of the monitors. The interviewer was stunned, and I was stunned too. I tried to explain, but I only made it worse. In the end, they told me to go home and wait for notification. When I walked out, I heard them laughing inside." Owen lowered his head and tucked the corner of the quilt in for her. "Tell me, why am I so useless? I can even mess up a job interview. When my ex-girlfriend dumped me back then, she said, 'Owen, this is as good as it gets for you. You're hopeless.' I wouldn't accept it then, but thinking about it now, she was right." His voice grew lower, as if talking to himself. "People like me just cause trouble for others by being alive." When the caregiver pushed the door open and came in, Owen was clipping Vivian's nails. "Owen, here again?" the caregiver said with a smile. "It's been over 3 years, rain or shine. You're here right on time at 6 every day." Owen didn't look up. "Her fingernails grow fast. They need to be trimmed once a week." "You really treat her so well." The aunt sighed with emotion. "I've taken care of so many vegetative patients. It's good enough if the family can hold on for 3 months. I've never seen anyone like you." Owen smiled and didn't speak. He didn't tell the aunt that he originally came for the 40,000 yuan. But later, for some reason, coming to the hospital every day became a habit. She would listen to him talk, wouldn't mock him, wouldn't interrupt him. She was just a quiet tree hole. Miss Vivian, let me tell you another embarrassing thing. Owen packed his things to leave, then sat back down. I'm terrified of cockroaches. Once a cockroach got into my rental, and I was so scared I called the police. The police came and lectured me for half an hour, saying I was wasting police resources. I said I was really scared, and they said then move away. Where would I get the money to move? He sighed. Later I mentioned this to the landlord, and he said, what is a grown man afraid of cockroaches for? I told him I really am afraid, and he said then find a girlfriend to help you kill them. Where am I going to find a girlfriend? My ex-girlfriend left long ago because she thought I was poor. After packing his things, Owen checked the time, 7:45. It was time to leave, but today he didn't want to go. He sat back down by the bed, looking at her face. It had been over 3 years, and she hadn't changed a bit. Still so cold and beautiful, only with her eyes closed, as if she were asleep. Miss Vivian, I don't want to leave today. I want to talk with you a little longer. In high school, I had a secret crush on a girl named Fiona, our class monitor. She was incredibly beautiful and had great grades, always ranking in the top 10 of the grade in every exam. I sat behind her and would secretly look at her during class. But I never dared to speak to her. Once, when she came to my desk to collect homework, I was so nervous that I even wrote my name wrong. She glanced at me, said nothing, and just walked away. Later, after graduation, we went our separate ways. She got into a top university and joined a big company. I scraped into a third-tier college, went out to work, and ended up deep in debt. Sometimes I wonder, if I had been brave enough back then to confess my feelings to her, would things be different? But then I think even if I had confessed, she wouldn't have liked me. Someone like me isn't good enough for her. Owen lowered his head, his voice growing quieter. Someone like me isn't good enough for anyone. The light in the hospital room gradually faded as the sun set. Owen sat by the bedside holding her hand. Her hand was very cold, but he had long since grown used to it. Miss Vivian, just one more thing. His voice suddenly choked up. Before my dad passed away, he told me not to live in debt. He said that the most important thing in life is to live with a clear conscience. But now I owe $800,000, and I owe the Sue family a debt of gratitude. I don't know when I'll ever be able to pay it back. Sometimes I wonder, what would have happened if I hadn't signed this agreement back then? I probably would have been driven to death by loan sharks. But having signed the agreement, I feel like I'm cheating the Sue family out of their money. I literally do nothing but sit by your bed and talk, yet I take $40,000 a month. I'm not a good person, Miss Vivian. I'm a coward, a fraud, a kept man who lives off a woman. His tears suddenly fell and splashed onto the back of her hand.
I'm sorry.
Owen didn't know how long he had been crying. By the time he raised his head, the sky was completely dark. Only a small lamp was lit in the hospital room, its dim yellow light shining on her face. He stood up, preparing to leave. Just then, he saw it, her finger moved. Owen froze. He thought he was seeing things, so he rubbed his eyes and looked again. That pale hand trembled once more. Miss Vivian? His voice was trembling. Can you hear me? There was no answer, but her eyelids began to flutter lightly, as if struggling to open. Owen's heart began to race. For over 3 years, she had never shown any reaction. The doctors said she would never wake up, and everyone had given up. But at this moment, her eyelashes were trembling, and her hand was exerting force. Miss Vivian! Owen rushed to the door and shouted, "Doctor! Doctor! Someone! Quick!" Hurried footsteps echoed in the corridor. He turned around and saw her eyes slowly open. Those eyes were deep and lucid, quietly staring at him. Owen froze in place. For over 3 years, he had talked by her bedside every day, peeling back the most shameful, the most wretched, and the most authentic parts of himself for her to see. He thought she couldn't hear him. He thought she would never know. But now she was awake. Owen. Her voice was hoarse and weak, but every word was incredibly clear. What you just said about having a crush on me. Say it again. When the doctor rushed in, Owen was still standing frozen in the corner. He looked at the woman on the hospital bed. Her eyes were open, her gaze clear and cold, and she was following the doctor's instructions to move her eyes. "Miss Vivian, can you hear me?" The doctor shone a flashlight into her eyes. "Yes." The voice was hoarse, but very calm. "That's wonderful. A miracle. Notify the Sue family immediately." Vivian's gaze swept past the doctor and landed on Owen. Owen stiffened all over. She had heard. She had heard it all. Half an hour later, the Sue family arrived. The first to enter was Simon, Vivian's second uncle. He wore a gray suit, his hair immaculate, his face wearing an expression of concern. "Vivian, you're finally awake." He hurried to the bedside and held her hand. "It's been over 3 years. Second uncle has been hoping every day that you would wake up." Vivian looked at him and said faintly, "Second uncle." Following close behind was Emily, his daughter. Wearing a white dress with her long hair loose, she appeared gentle and kind. "Sister." She rushed to the bedside, her eyes instantly turning red. "You don't know how worried I've been about you for over 3 years. I came to see you every day, wiping your face and trimming your nails." Owen stood in the corner and frowned. He had kept over 3 years' worth of nursing records. Emily had visited only 3 times, each time staying no more than 10 minutes, and she even brought a photographer to take pictures. "Emily," Vivian looked at her. "Thank you for your concern." The last to enter was Margaret. Pushed in a wheelchair, her hair completely silver, her face deeply lined, but her eyes were very bright. "Vivian," Margaret's voice trembled slightly. "Grandma came to see you." Vivian's eyes suddenly turned red. "Grandma." After the examination, the doctor announced that she could be transferred to a general ward. However, Miss Vivian has just woken up and is still physically weak. She needs time to recover. It would be best for someone to stay with her 24 hours a day. "I'll do it," Emily said immediately. "No need," Vivian spoke up. "I have a husband." All eyes turned to Owen. He stood in the corner, his plaid shirt faded from washing, his black-rimmed glasses slightly askew, looking awkward and embarrassed. Simon frowned. "Vivian, you've been in a coma for over 3 years, so there are things you aren't clear on. This Owen was hired by the Sue family. He gets $40,000 a month, and his only job is to sit in the hospital for 2 hours. He isn't your real husband." Emily chimed in. "Sis, men like this are only after the money. Now that you're awake, he definitely wants to cling to the Sue family and won't leave." Owen's face instantly turned pale. He knew he was hired, but having it said in front of so many people still made his face burn with humiliation. "Second uncle." Vivian's voice suddenly turned cold. "You don't need to judge my marital status." Simon paused. "Vivian, second uncle is doing this for your own good. You've been in a coma for over 3 years, and the company needs someone to manage it. This man can't help you." "I know what kind of help I need." Vivian looked at him. "Second uncle, please go back first. I'm tired." Simon's expression changed, and he turned to leave. Emily followed him out, glaring fiercely at Owen before leaving. Only Margaret, Vivian, and Owen remained in the ward. Margaret looked at Vivian and suddenly smiled. "It's been over 3 years, and your temper is still the same. Get some rest. Grandma will come see you again tomorrow." The wheelchair was pushed out, and the ward door closed. Silence. "Owen." Her voice interrupted him. "Come here." He walked stiffly to the bedside. She looked at him, her gaze moving from his face to his glasses, then to his faded shirt, and finally settling on his eyes. 3 years and 3 months. You come every day?" "Yes." "You talk a lot every day?" "Yes." The corners of her mouth curled up slightly. "I heard it all." A loud ringing went off in Owen's head. What did you say?" "I said, I heard everything." Her voice was very calm. "Every word you said. Your crush, your embarrassing moments, your cockroaches, your ex-girlfriend, your debt, your father." Owen's face instantly flushed red. "That Fiona you have a crush on. High school class monitor. Good grades, pretty, later joined a big company. That was back in high school. I've long forgotten it by now. Vivian looked at his flustered appearance and suddenly smiled. Faint but genuine. Owen, don't be nervous. Sit down. He sat stiffly on the chair beside the bed. I was in a coma for over 3 years. And you took care of me for over 3 years. Her voice softened. I know you signed the agreement for the money, but I also know that, for over 3 years, you came to the hospital every single day without fail, feeding me, washing my face, trimming my nails, and talking to me. You earned that money. However, her tone shifted. Now that I'm awake, shouldn't you listen to what I have to say? She fell silent for a moment, her gaze drifting out the window. 3 years ago on that day, I was rushing to meet someone, an old friend of my father, who said he had something important to tell me. I was driving there when I was hit by a truck at an intersection. Later, I found out that the truck was intentional. Within the Sue family, someone didn't want me to know the truth, the real cause of my father's death. Owen's heart skipped a beat. Do you know who it was? I have my suspicions, but no evidence. She looked at him, her expression turning serious. Owen, I was in a coma for over 3 years. The Sue family thought I would never wake up. They did many things, assuming I wouldn't find out. Now that I'm awake, they're afraid. Next, they'll come after me. And they'll come after you too. I'm just a hired hand doing a job for money. You are my husband. She interrupted him. My legal husband. If they want to come after me, they'll start with you. You are my weak spot. Owen's face turned pale. Then, I'll get a divorce. No. If you get divorced, you'll be in even more danger. They'll think you're a pawn I discarded. They'll try to squeeze information out of you, and then silence you once they're done. Owen's legs started to tremble. Then, what should I do? Being afraid is the right reaction. It shows you're normal. She reached out and took his hand. Her hand was still cold, but her grip was firm. Owen, listen to me. From now on, you're not just a husband I hired. You are one of mine. I will protect you, but you also have to help me keep an eye on second uncle. What he's done, who he's met, what he's said over the last 3 years. I want to know. Owen looked at her hand holding his mind in chaos. He should have refused. He was just an ordinary person, why should he get dragged into this? But as she held his hand, he suddenly remembered every day of the past 3 years. The words spoken by her bedside, the parts of himself he had opened up. Okay. He heard himself say, I'll help you. Vivian looked at him, the corners of her mouth slightly upturned. Thank you. From today on, we're partners. She tightened her grip on his hand. Her fingertips were ice cold, yet exceptionally firm. By the way, those things you said at the hospital earlier. Keep going, I love listening to them. When Owen walked into the Sue Group building for the first time, he felt like a beggar who had broken into a palace. The lobby was paved with marble, crystal chandeliers hung down from the 3rd floor, and the receptionist wore a standard smile. He looked down at himself. The cuffs of his plaid shirt were faded from washing, and his canvas shoes cost 50 yuan a pair. Mr. Owen? Miss Vivian is waiting for you in the conference room on the top floor. There was a mirror in the elevator. He saw that his hair was a bit messy, his glasses were slightly crooked, and he looked altogether timid and shrinking. He took a deep breath. In the conference room, men in suits were seated on both sides of the long table. Simon sat at the head of the table, with Emily beside him. Margaret sat in a wheelchair in the corner, her eyes closed. Vivian sat at the other end, dressed in a white hospital gown, her face pale, but her back ramrod straight. When Owen walked in, Simon frowned. Vivian, this is a meeting. What did you bring an outsider for? He's not an outsider. He is my husband. Whispers rippled through the conference room. Is that the one who makes 40,000 a month? I heard he's a pauper, up to his ears in debt. Is someone like that really fit for the board? Owen's face flushed instantly. He gripped the document folder, not knowing where to stand. Sit down. Vivian pointed to the empty seat beside her. He walked over stiffly and sat down. All right, Let's begin the meeting. Simon tapped on the table. Vivian has been in a coma for over 3 years, and the company needs someone to manage it. She has just woken up and is still physically weak, so she likely won't be able to work normally in the short term. My proposal is for the board of directors to temporarily take over the company's affairs. I object. Vivian spoke up. The company was left to me by my father, and I have the right to manage it. Vivian, you've been in a coma for over 3 years. You don't understand the current situation. I can adapt as I go. Are you sure you're up to the task in your current condition? Simon's tone turned serious. If something goes wrong at work, who will be responsible? Emily chimed in as well. Sis, Dad is doing this for your own good. Focus on recovering for now. Leave the company to us. Leave it to you? Vivian sneered. Leave what to you? To hollow out the company? The conference room fell silent instantly. Simon's expression changed. Vivian, what do you mean by that? What it means, second uncle knows perfectly well. Vivian looked at him. Do you have the guts to make the Sue family's accounts for the past 3 years public? The atmosphere was tense. Owen sat nearby, his palms sweating. He couldn't understand the accounts, but he could sense that Vivian was fighting alone. Owen. Simon suddenly turned to him, a smile on his face. You are her husband. You should know her physical condition best. What do you think? A trap. Owen knew this was a trap. I think. Forget it. Simon waved his hand. You're just a hired hand. What do you know? Asking you is a waste of time. A ripple of laughter went through the conference room. Exactly what does a kept man know? Owen clenched his fists. His face stung, and he wanted to stand up and leave. Owen. Vivian's voice stopped him. He looked up at her. Her gaze was calm, as if saying, Don't be afraid. What are you holding in your hand? Huh? It's my nursing records from the past 3 years. Show everyone. Read it. Owen stood up, his hands trembling slightly. He opened the document bag. Inside was a thick stack of paper, with each page containing his handwritten notes. June 15, 2023, from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Miss Vivian's condition is stable. Her face was wiped, and her nails were trimmed. Someone in the conference room sneered. What's the use of reading this? Owen ignored it and continued flipping through. July 3, 2023, from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Second uncle came to see her, bringing 2 people, and they spoke in the ward. He said, Vivian probably won't wake up. We need to find a way to get the company shares. The person next to him said, What about Owen? He said, A pauper. Just give him some money to send him away. The conference room fell silent instantly. Simon's face turned beet red. You're talking nonsense. There are no cameras in the ward. Owen's voice trembled slightly. But I have a recording. He pulled an old phone from his pocket and pressed play. Simon's voice came through, crystal clear. That girl Vivian probably won't wake up. We have to find a way to get the shares. A collective gasp echoed through the conference room. Simon's face instantly turned pale. This is forged. Uncle, are you sure you want to claim this is forged in front of all the directors? Sis, Emily panicked. This Owen was hired by you, so of course he'll lie for you. A kept man. Vivian stood up. Her face was still pale, but her presence completely overpowered everyone in the room. Whether he's a kept man or not, I know perfectly well. But there is one thing I can be certain of. In these 3 years, he has come to the hospital to accompany me every single day, rain or shine, without fail. He fed me, wiped my face, trimmed my nails, and talked to me. Some of the things he said were embarrassing, some were funny, and some moved me. He didn't know I could hear him, yet he spoke every day. He didn't come for the money. He truly treated me as a person, not a vegetable. She turned to Simon. Second uncle, what about you? How many times have you come to see me in these 3 years? And what purpose did you bring with you each time? Do you see me as your niece, or as a legacy to be divided up? Enough. Margaret suddenly spoke up. She opened her eyes, her gaze sharp. Simon, I know perfectly well what you've done. You know in your own heart how much public funds you embezzled while Vivian was in a coma these past 3 years. From today on, Vivian takes full control of the company. You are temporarily suspended pending investigation and must not interfere in company affairs. The conference room door was pushed open, and several people in uniform walked in. Mr. Simon, you are suspected of embezzlement and misappropriation of public funds. Please cooperate with the investigation. Simon slumped in his chair, his face pale. Emily rushed over, on the verge of tears. Dad! Owen stood rooted to the spot, completely stunned. He had just read a record and played a recording. Owen! Vivian's voice cut him off. She stood before him, her gaze calm. You did well. From today on, you are no longer just my contractual husband. You are the special assistant of the Sue Group. My special assistant. After the meeting, Margaret had the caregiver push her over to Owen. She looked at him, her eyes bright. Young man, you're not bad. Vivian is a stubborn girl, and she's stubborn about her standards too. The person she chose won't be bad. Owen blushed. We're just... an agreement. An agreement? Margaret looked at him. Do you think Vivian is the kind of person who just signs agreements casually? She signed this agreement because she trusts you. Although she was in a coma for over 3 years, she heard every word you said. She knows what kind of person you are. She chose you not because you are cheap, but because you are worth it. Owen stood there, his mind in chaos. Was he worth it? Owen. Vivian's voice came from behind him. He turned to look at her. She stood there, her hospital gown a bit loose, making her look even more frail, but her eyes were bright. Let's go home. The Sue family mansion, you'll be living there from now on. I'll be living there? The Sue family mansion was on the outskirts of the city, covering an area of 3,000 square meters. The garden alone was 10 times larger than the apartment Owen rented. When the car drove through the main gate, Owen pressed his entire body against the car window, his eyes wide open. Don't be nervous, Vivian said without turning her head. From now on, this is your home too. She pushed the door open and walked into her room. Outside the floor-to-ceiling window was a garden, and sunlight poured in. Owen stood at the doorway, unsure whether to enter. Come in. Vivian sat on the edge of the bed looking at him. I have something to show you. My diary. I wrote it after waking up. I remember every single word I heard while I was in a coma. Owen took it and opened the first page. June 3, 2023. He came for the first time. Plaid shirt, black-rimmed glasses, very nervous when speaking. He asked if I could hear him. I said no. So he started talking to himself. His finger paused for a moment. Then he continued flipping. June 15th. 10 minutes late today, said the landlord was pressing for rent. He started talking about his debts, his father, his ex-girlfriend. His eyes were red when he spoke, but he didn't cry. July 3rd. Today he told a very embarrassing story. In an interview, he said, "Hello, pervert," instead of "hello." I almost laughed out loud. August 20th. He cried today, said he was useless and didn't deserve anyone. I wanted to tell him that he does deserve someone, but I couldn't open my mouth. Owen looked up abruptly, his face instantly flushing red. You were in a coma, weren't you? In a coma, but I could hear. Every word you said I heard. After waking up, I wrote it all down, one by one. She paused, her gaze falling on that diary. Over 3 years, more than 1,000 days. However many sentences you spoke, that is how many pages I wrote. Owen looked down at the thick notebook in his hands and suddenly felt it was as heavy as a stone. Every page was evidence of him talking to himself by her bedside. Why didn't you tell me sooner? How could I? I couldn't move, I couldn't speak. I could only listen. She looked at him. But now you know, I heard it all. Miss Vivian, Call me Vivian. Vivian, I will stay by your side from now on. She looked at him and suddenly smiled. I know. By the way, that Fiona you mentioned, I looked her up. She was the class monitor in high school, graduated from a top university, and is now an investment director at Zhao Group. She got divorced 3 years ago and is single. Zhao Group wants to acquire Su Group, and she is the lead negotiator. So you'll be seeing her very soon. Owen's face instantly flushed red. I have nothing to do with her. That was over a decade ago. I know. Vivian looked at him. Just reminding you. No need to get nervous, no matter who she is or what she wants. You're mine. The next day, a guest arrived at the Su Group. Owen stood at the conference room door, watching the woman in white business attire walk in. She was beautiful, with long hair draped over her shoulders and delicate features. Fiona, investment director at Zhao Group. Fiona walked into the conference room, her gaze sweeping over those present before finally landing on Owen. She paused for a moment. Owen, why are you here? I work at Su's. Work? Fiona approached him, looking him up and down. Since when? Just recently. Miss Fiona. Vivian's voice came from the conference room. Please come in. Fiona glanced at Owen, then turned and walked in. In the conference room, Fiona sat across from Vivian, wearing a professional smile. Miss Vivian, the Zhao family is very interested in the Su family, and we have an acquisition proposal we'd like you to consider. The Su family is not for sale. Miss Vivian, you have just awakened. There are still internal issues to deal with. The Zhao family can help you. Help me? Vivian sneered. Help me hollow out the company? Is your cooperation with Simon also a sign of sincerity? Fiona's expression changed. Miss Vivian, I don't know what you're talking about. You don't know? I've been in a coma for over 3 years. But I could hear. I heard Simon on the phone with someone from the Zhao family, saying they wanted to join forces to take over the Su family. You're with the Zhao family. How could you not know? Fiona's face turned pale instantly. Miss Vivian, go back and tell your boss. The Su Group is not for sale. If the Zhao Group tries to use underhanded tactics, I will make you pay the price. Fiona bit her lip and stood up, turning to walk out. Just as she reached the door, she suddenly stopped. Owen, are you okay? Owen nodded. I'm doing fine. That's good. Fiona looked at him. Get in touch when you're free. She turned and walked away. Owen watched her retreating figure. The person who used to make his heart race back then was now just a blurred silhouette. Some things, once they're in the past, are just in the past. In the conference room, Vivian looked at Owen. She told you to contact her. There's nothing between us. A high school crush, but that's all in the past. I know. Vivian looked at him and reached out to straighten his collar. Your shirt is wrinkled. Let's go eat. You've been feeding me chicken soup for over 3 years. Today it's my treat. From now on, I'm going to be good to you too. She turned and walked out. Just as she reached the door, she suddenly looked back. By the way, that person you have a crush on is indeed quite pretty. Owen's face instantly turned red. I've really moved on. Is that so? Vivian looked at him, her gaze carrying a hint of curiosity. Then who do you like now? Owen froze. He looked at Vivian, his heart suddenly beating faster. Never mind. Tell me when you've made up your mind. The first time Owen was besieged by reporters was at the entrance of the Su Group. Mr. Owen, someone reported that you embezzled public funds, and $3 million was transferred into your private account. Owen froze. When he returned to the Su family mansion, Vivian was reviewing documents in the living room. Vivian, there are reporters outside. I know. It was Simon. He had someone fabricate evidence claiming that $3 million from the Su Group was transferred into your account and then immediately moved out. He wants to make you a stain on the Su Group and force me to divorce you. Owen's face turned pale. Then, what should we do? Don't panic. I have a plan. The next day, the Su family held an emergency board meeting. The conference room was packed, and the atmosphere was heavy. Ladies and gentlemen, evidence shows that $3 million in public funds were transferred to Mr. Owen's private account. A director wearing gold-rimmed glasses stood up and said, I didn't. The evidence is conclusive. What do you have to say for yourself? Enough. Vivian spoke up. The evidence you're talking about was provided by Simon, right? You actually dare to trust evidence provided by someone who is out on bail and under investigation. Ms. Vivian, regardless of who provided it, facts are facts. Fine, let me ask you this. Have you checked Owen's personal accounts? How much money is in his account right now? 23,000. He earns a monthly salary of 40,000, pays 20,000 in debt, and has 20,000 left for food and rent. He lives in a basement. The rent is 800. His clothes cost 50 each. You're telling me that someone like this embezzled 3 million? The conference room fell silent. This money was forged by Simon. He had the money transferred into Owen's account and then immediately moved it out. Owen knew nothing about it. Miss Vivian, do you have any evidence? Vivian took out a voice recorder and pressed play. Simon's voice came out. Yeah, the money has been transferred. Owen's account. Transfer it in and then out, and let him take the blame. The conference room fell silent instantly. This is the evidence. Also, the public funds Simon embezzled over the past 3 years amount to far more than 3 million. I've checked. It's 32 million. All transferred to the overseas accounts held by him and Emily. She produced another document. Bank transaction records. A collective gasp echoed through the conference room. Wait! Emily suddenly stood up, her face pale. Sis! Emily, you and Simon embezzled the funds together. Did you think I didn't know? I heard you on the phone with Simon, talking about sending me to a mental hospital. I heard you say that Owen is a pauper and could be bought off with a little money. I remember every single word you said. Emily's face instantly turned ashen. Cease. Enough. From today on, you will be investigated just like Simon. The Sue family doesn't feed parasites. Emily was taken away. The conference room was so quiet that only the sound of breathing remained. Vivian returned to her seat and looked at the directors present. The Sue family is mine, and I won't let anyone carve it up. Those who disagree can leave, but before you do, let's settle the accounts. Any more questions? No one spoke. After the meeting, Margaret had the caregiver wheel her over to Owen. She looked at him, her eyes bright. Young man, are you scared? Yes. It's right to be scared. Being scared means you're still alive. She suddenly smiled. Vivian is a stubborn girl, and she's stubborn about her choices too. She chose you, which means she trusts you. Treat her well from now on. Owen blushed. I will. Go ahead. She's waiting for you. Vivian stood at the conference room door looking at Owen. Let's go home. You must have been scared today, right? Owen lowered his head without speaking. He really was terrified. He thought he was just an ordinary person, never imagining he would be framed or besieged by reporters. But Vivian protected him. She stood in front of him, blocking all attacks. Vivian, thank you. What are you thanking me for? You are mine. Protecting you is my responsibility. She turned and walked out, but suddenly stopped at the door. What did you want to say just now? Say whatever you want. I don't find you annoying. Owen froze. He looked at her back, and his heart suddenly started beating faster. Vivian, I will always be with you. She turned back to look at him. I know. I knew it from the moment you signed the agreement. 3 months later, the crisis at Sue's finally passed. Simon was formally charged with embezzlement and misappropriation of public funds, receiving combined punishment for several crimes. Emily was marginalized. The Zhao family's acquisition plan went bankrupt, and Fiona was transferred back to headquarters, never to be seen again. Counting from the day Vivian woke up, exactly 3 years and 3 months have passed. Vivian sat in her office looking out at the city, a faint smile on her lips. For over 3 years, she lay in a hospital bed, able to hear every conspiracy but powerless to do anything. Now, she had finally reclaimed everything that belonged to her. Miss Vivian. A knock at the door. Owen pushed the door open and entered, holding a document. This month's financial report. Vivian took it and flipped through a few pages. Not bad. You found 3 accounting errors and saved the company 500,000. Owen blushed. I just organized it a bit. It wasn't just organizing. Vivian stood up and walked over to him. Owen, you've made great progress over the past 3 months. There's a dinner tonight. Come with me. Dinner. The Sue family's annual appreciation dinner. What am I going there for? You are my husband. If you don't go, who will? The dinner was held at the Sue Group banquet hall. Owen wore a black suit, his hair neatly combed, and had on new glasses. Standing beside Vivian, he looked like a completely different person from 3 months ago. Mr. Owen. A woman in a red evening gown approached with a smile. Long time no see. Owen froze. He knew this woman, his ex-girlfriend, Serena. Serena? What are you doing here? Attending the dinner, of course. Serena sized him up. You've done well for yourself, Owen. I heard you became Miss Vivian's special assistant. Care to meet up sometime? Owen froze. Didn't we break up? So what if we broke up? We can start over. You're doing so well now. I won't look down on you anymore. Owen's expression changed. You dumped me because you thought I was poor. Now that I'm doing well, you want to come back? Serena, what do you take me for? Serena's smile stiffened. Owen, don't say that. I was wrong back then, too realistic. But I've realized now that you're a good man. Let's start over. Okay? She reached out to take his arm. He is already taken. A cold voice came from behind. Serena froze and turned around. Vivian stood there, dressed in a white gown, exuding a powerful aura. Serena's expression changed. Miss Vivian. Miss Serena. Which company are you from? Marketing manager at Hangda Group. Hangda? I'll go check Hangda's qualifications tomorrow. If your company likes to poach people from others, the Sue family won't work with Hangda. Serena's face instantly turned pale. Miss Vivian, I didn't what? You dumped him back then because you thought he was poor, and now that he's doing well, you want to come back. What do you take him for? What do you take me for? He is my person. Anyone who dares touch him must answer to me first. Serena looked ashen, turned around, and ran away. Owen stood there, completely stunned. You, just now, helped you chase away a gold digger. Aren't you going to thank me? Thank you. Just saying it with words? That's not sincere. Then, how do you want me to thank you? Vivian looked at him and suddenly smiled. Never mind, no rush. I'll thank you when I've figured it out. She turned and walked out, stopping suddenly at the doorway. Owen, you look really handsome in that suit today. After the dinner ended, they returned to the Sue family mansion together. The garden lights were on, and Vivian walked over to sit on a bench. Owen, come here. He walked over and sat beside her. What do you want to say? Vivian looked at him, her gaze very gentle. Owen, you've been saying it for over 3 years, and I've been listening for over 3 years. Now it's my turn to say it to you. Thank you. Thank you for your company over these past 3 years. Thank you for not giving up on me during my darkest times. Thank you for treating me like a human being, not a vegetable. Thank you for being willing to stay by my side after I woke up. Owen looked at her, his throat feeling tight. I didn't do anything. You did a lot. Coming to the hospital every day, talking to me every day, treating me like a living, breathing person. You don't know how much that meant to me. I lay there for over 3 years, hearing every scheme but unable to do anything. Just listening. Listening to Simon plotting against me. Listening to Emily's hypocrisy. Listening to everyone treating me like a symbol about to vanish. Only you treated me as someone you could confide in. The things you said, some were embarrassing, some were funny, some touched me, but every word made me feel that I was still alive. Thank you, Owen. Owen looked at her, his eyes growing warm. Vivian, I just wanted someone to talk to. I know, but the person you found was me. That's enough. She reached out and held his hand. Owen, from today on, we're in this together. No matter what happens, I'll protect you. Do you trust me? Owen looked at her holding his hand, his heart beating a little fast. I do. That's good. Vivian looked at him and suddenly smiled. By the way, that secret you mentioned yesterday, The one from the day we signed the agreement. You haven't told me yet. Owen blushed. I said it. Don't get mad. I'm not angry. Really? Really? Owen took a deep breath. The day I signed the agreement. That was the first time I saw you. You were lying in a hospital bed, eyes closed, your face very pale. But at that moment, I thought, this woman is so beautiful. Vivian froze. What did you say? I said, I think you're beautiful. I know I shouldn't think that while you were in a coma, but at that moment I just felt. You are the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. Vivian looked at him and suddenly smiled. So that's why you signed the agreement? No. I did it for the money. I owe 800,000 and need money. It's just. Incidentally, I think you're beautiful. By the way, you come to the hospital to keep me company every day. And by the way, you've been talking to me for over 3 years? Owen, are you sure it's just by the way? Owen's face grew redder and redder. I admit it. You like me. You've liked me since over 3 years ago. Owen looked at her, his heart beating so fast it felt like it would leap out of his chest. He wanted to deny it, but as he looked into her eyes, he suddenly couldn't say a word. Yes, I like you. I've liked you since over 3 years ago. Vivian looked at him, the corners of her mouth lifting. That's good, because I like you too. You came every day, talked every day, treated me like a living person. I listened for over 3 years, and I've liked you for over 3 years. I just couldn't wake up, and couldn't say it. Now I'm awake, and I can say it. Owen, I like you. Owen stared at her blankly, completely stunned. You? Like me? Yeah. Any problem? No problem. I just can't believe it. You don't believe it? Then let me prove it to you. She reached up and cupped his face, then kissed him. Owen froze in place, his whole body stiffening. Her lips were soft, with a cool touch. All the inferiority, humiliation, and tears of the past 3 years turned into a searing heat in this instant. He didn't know what to do. His hands didn't know where to go, and his heart raced as if it were about to burst. Then she let go. Do you believe me now? Owen's face turned as red as a cooked shrimp. I believe you. That's good. Vivian looked at him and suddenly smiled. Let's go home. Our home. Owen, from now on, it's real. Not an agreement. It's real. She reached out to pull him up and held his hand. Let's go, hubby. Let's go home. Owen paused for a moment, then smiled. Okay, wifey. Let's go home. Moonlight spilled over the garden, casting long shadows of the two figures. From this day forward, there would be no more Tree Hollow, because they had finally become each other's home. June 3, 2023. It was his first time here. Plaid shirt, black-rimmed glasses, speaking very nervously. He asked if I could hear him, and I said no, so he started talking to himself. Said he owed 800,000. Said his father had passed away. Said his ex-girlfriend dumped him because he was poor. His eyes were red when he spoke, but he didn't cry. I wanted to tell him he didn't need to act tough, but I couldn't open my mouth. July 3, 2023. Today he said something incredibly embarrassing. In an interview he said, hello, as hello, pervert. I almost laughed out loud. I wanted to tell him I've had my own socially awkward moments, but I couldn't open my mouth. August 20th, 2023. Today he cried. He said he was useless and didn't deserve anyone. I wanted to tell him that you do deserve it. You deserve it more than anyone. But I couldn't open my mouth. January 1st, 2024. New Year. He brought dumplings and said Happy New Year. I wanted to say Happy New Year, but I couldn't open my mouth. May 12th, 2025. It's the 3rd year. He brought a cake and said, Happy birthday, Miss Vivian. I am 35 years old. After saying that, he fell silent, sat there for a long time and then said, Miss Vivian, if only you could wake up. How I wanted to tell him that I can't wake up. But I can hear him. But I couldn't open my mouth. June 10th, 2025. Today he broke down and said he wants a divorce. Panicked. I wanted to say no, if you leave, I'll truly be all alone. But I couldn't open my mouth. Then my finger moved. June 11th, 2025. I woke up. I opened my eyes and saw him frozen in place. He didn't know I had heard all the secrets. But I knew he was the only one who treated me like a person. Owen, thank you. From today on, let me protect you. December 20th, 2025. I finished handling everything today. We won. He stood beside me wearing the suit I bought him, looking especially handsome. Suddenly, I remembered how he looked when he first came over 3 years ago. It's been over 3 years, and we have both changed. January 16th, 2026. He moved into the master bedroom. I woke up in the middle of the night and saw him sleeping beside me, breathing evenly. I gently held his hand. Suddenly, I wanted to cry. It's been over 3 years, and we are finally together. Owen, thank you for not giving up on me. From now on, it's my turn to stay by your side.